Hello and welcome. Another edition of Coach's Corner, Thursday evenings, 9 p.m. Eastern. We are joined each week by a college coach from anywhere across the country, and we talk youth baseball, travel baseball, and obviously college baseball. My name is Walter Beede, aka Baseball Lifer, and I'm really happy to be able to bring this content to families, student athletes, so that they can gain some valuable insight with regard to the college baseball experience, and we get to hear it directly from the college coaches. This evening, we're really thrilled to be joined by a former big leaguer, which seems to be a trend, and we're going to get into that tonight with our guest. Head coach, Illinois State within the Missouri Valley Conference, Steve Holm. Steve, thank you so much for taking a few minutes to join us today.
No, thank you for having me.
You're very, very welcome. I wanted to start on that topic. You have an interesting journey being from Northern California, playing baseball at the Division I level at Oral Roberts, being an All-American, ultimately getting drafted, achieving a lifelong dream, I would assume, to become a big leaguer, and now find yourself as a college head coach. We find more former major leaguers finding their way back to college baseball. Can you talk about your journey from big leaguer to back to the college world with regard to coaching and what that's like and what you have to offer student athletes at Illinois State?
Yeah, I mean, mine, I was really, really lucky. I was playing in AAA my last year. I was 32 years old, kind of on one leg per se, if that, as a catcher. I had at least one flat tire, if not two. And I got a friend of mine texted me that it was in like July, and he said, "Hey, give me a call after the game." And I called him, and he said, Reggie Christensen at the Sacramento State um, head coach wants to talk to you about possibly coaching for him next year. And at that point, I know I'm closer to the end than I'm at the beginning of my career at this point. And so I talked to him that night, and we talked for like an hour, and it was a really good conversation. And I knew I wanted to coach at the end of my journey, and obviously I didn't know exactly which route I was going to take. And I told him, I said, I'm very interested, but I'm not going to quit. I'm going to keep playing. I felt as a catcher, you're a foul tip away. And so he said he'll circle back. And 3 days later, I got released, and I was like, oh, you kind of take a peek up, like, all right, I get it, So I went home, and I waited a couple days, and I called him and went and sat down. And at the end of the meeting, he's like, the job's yours if you want it, And I said, well, I'll call you tomorrow. And I went home, and I just, I called him the next day, and I said, hey, I just need a couple days to call some people, but I want the job, just don't announce anything yet. There's some people that probably need to hear from me first. So that was my plan. I wanted to coach, and I got into college coaching, but I had a lot of professional opportunities to go back and coach or manage and, do some things like that. And, I wanted to kind of give it 1 year, go through the college cycle. And I had a team that, told me, hey, at the end of that year, you can jump in, and, we'll bring you on, and, then manage the following season. And that year was really fun. We had a lot of guys and that did really well. I was a hitting coach, and then, did the pitching as well that year. And I remember at one point, I texted the guy, and I said, hey, I'm not going to take that job. I'm going to stay. I'm going to do this. This is kind of, where I want to be, sleeping in my own bed. And you felt like you were having more of an impact with a college kid than you would a professional, where sometimes you can or can't coach them, in today's
Right,
professional game. But
right.
there's a lot to that side of things. But ultimately, you looked up, and at the end of that season, I felt like I made an impact on a couple of these guys, probably last for a long, long time. And I don't know if you could have done that in pro ball, and that was my decision at that point.
Well, I think what's really interesting is that you have some very valuable insights that you're able to share with potential and future recruits with regard to the process as a high school athlete, a college student athlete, what it's like at the professional level, and what it's like to achieve and live that dream as a big league player. And so, one of the first questions that was submitted to us when people knew that you were going to be joining me this evening, they wanted to know when you began as a head coach, specifically at Illinois State. You started at a time, I believe it was 5 years ago. Then you run into COVID. We're kind of coming out of that. Can you talk about building a program, taking over a program and building a program, and what your area of focus was with regard to the Missouri Valley Conference and specifically Illinois State?
Well, when we got here, we were handed over some really good players, and we thought we would have a chance to win for the first 2 years. And at that point, we thought we'd do some rebuilding. That there was a few players that left during the time when there is no coach, and there was no portal then. So the older guys were kind of stuck at Illinois State, if that makes
Right.
sense, which
Right.
we were thankful for. But ultimately, we lost a lot of the really good young players, and we knew that this thing was going to kind of you were going to fall off a cliff a little bit because with your experience and age, and we ultimately got too many guys drafted in 2019 off of that club. There was 4 juniors. There was an incoming guy that was lost, and we just looked up and like, okay, we're probably rebuilding now as opposed to the following season. So we knew, and we'd done our research, and the teams that were winning in our league were predominantly doing that with high school players. And we certainly targeted some junior college players that kind of fill in the gap per se, but we had no intent to build our team around it. And it happened that way, and we were going with a high school player, and then COVID happened. And since then, there's been a couple teams in our league do really well with some junior college players, and most of those guys, it's that third year COVID guy that you're getting out of the JC that it remains to be seen how well that goes going forward. But we had that decision to make kind of in that 2021 time to say what do we want to do? Do we want to kind of change directions here and go jump that junior college train, or should we just kind of stay with where we're at? And we ultimately chose to stay with where we're at. Our 2022 class is probably the best one that we've ever put together, and a lot of that came from winning in 19. A lot of those commits that we had in that 22 class committed to us because of the success that we'd had in 19 and then in the short part of 2020. And we're pumped to have them. It's just taking a little while to get some of those high school ranks on the field. So like when the fall ended, we went to we had a couple outside competitions, and we kind of ran out what we thought was our A team at that point. And right now we have some guys that are battling some positions, and they're trying to have a say in what we thought was at that point. But at the end of the fall, we had a freshman in left field that was a local Illinois kid, with a sophomore in center that we recruited out of high school. A right fielder was a JC kid. We had a California kid at third base that was 2 years at COVID in California JC. So I think he played 13 games in 2 years.
Wow.
He played for us last year. And our shortstop is a homegrown kid that we got out of high school. We had kind of 3 guys to play second base and first base. And one's a high school, like a top 500 kid out of Illinois. He's a freshman. And then we have one portal guy in there, and then a junior college first baseman only. So one of the second basemen can play first. So that's kind of what our team looked like. There's a little bit of mix. One portal guy, in the infield, there's a portal catcher, and then we got 2 portal pitchers. A couple JC guys sprinkled in, but most of the talent, at least like the draftable talent, tends to come from the high school side, at least for schools like us.
Well, it's really refreshing to hear a college coach talk about the high school student athlete in a really positive way. And I think parents often misunderstand, college coaches. It's not like that they want to push a high school student athlete off to the side. Sometimes it's just a matter of physical preparation, game strength, I guess, is what we would call it. So when you're out looking at a high school student athlete trying to project, what type of student athlete are you looking for at Illinois State that is kind of a ready student athlete? I know it's obviously physical strength, but game awareness, game instincts? What are you looking for in a potential recruit?
We really we try to stay up the middle. I think the better players play up the middle longer. It was one thing when I was with the Giants, our third baseman was a shortstop growing up. The shortstop was obviously a shortstop. Ray Durham played second base. He played shortstop for a long time.
Wow.
Rich Aurelio was playing first base. He was a shortstop. Aaron Rowan was our center fielder. He had gone to Cal State Fullerton as a shortstop. Dave Roberts was our left fielder, so I don't think he played much shortstop being left-handed. But Benji Molina and I both started out as shortstops. I played shortstop all the way through college before I started catching. So ultimately, that was that thing that was always in my mind is the best players play shortstop until somebody else tells them they can't, right? So we try to stay up the middle. I think your shortstop needs to be your best player. So when we go watch kids, we look for the best player and we look, where are you hitting them? If I go see a club that you're putting together, you get to see those kids every day for, whether it be 60 days, 80 days out of the year, whatever it is. If you're hitting the kid that I like in the 8-hole, I think you know something more than I know. We're probably not, we're not going too far for recruiting a bunch of 8-hole hitters. So, that's one of the questions we ask. Hey, where do you hit him in the lineup? How come? How come you hit him 2, not 5? How come, whatever that may be. And usually you'll start spilling some beans with that, and we'll find out a little bit more about him than what we can just see in a 2-game, clip sometimes. So that's what we're, really looking for, is the guy who can really play. On the academic side, the guys that play best for us, 3.7 to 4.0 students. We just had our baseball team got recognized yesterday at the basketball game. There was 8 4.0s. Self-motivated guys. The NCAA does not give us enough time to properly get equipped for the season. If you're not self-motivated and doing some things on your own, you're probably going to get left behind. So those are things that are important to us. Now, if kid's got a 2.9, but he throws, 97, 98 miles an hour, we probably take a flyer on the guy. But ultimately, the guys that have played really well for us, we've gone through, we've done our homework. We know the occupations that parents have that tend to be better for us. We do really well with farmers' kids out here. Farmers got to plant all their seed in April. They don't get to harvest it until, September, October. Those kids know how to put in work in the fall and get to harvest on that scoreboard come, February, March, April, May into June. So those are things that we kind of look for and, and hopefully work out well for us.
Well, interesting that you talk about, from a student athlete's perspective, the role of academics, but really how that academic transcript speaks to the accountability as far as a student being self-aware and involved and engaged in a total package. When you're recruiting, what does Illinois State have to offer that makes them different or unique, not only within the Missouri Valley Conference, but within college baseball? What is Illinois State offering to a prospective student athlete that makes it unique?
The school itself is one of those places that if I cut 10 guys tomorrow, I bet 5 of them stay at the school. Like they really like going to school at Illinois State. I did not know that when I took the job. I figured it out. We had a Saturday practice. It was about my 3rd weekend in, and I showed up and I was like, these guys might have had too much fun on Friday night. And it was pretty apparent, 30 minutes. Once you got through stretch, you started seeing fatigue, so it is a really fantastic place to go to school. That's been apparent from the get-go, and not just that scene of things. There's a lot of one of the things that intrigued me about the job was I was working at Purdue at that point. So at Purdue, you'd go into Chicago to recruit. Chicago has really good baseball, and the Big Ten schools are pretty expensive if you're from out of state. So you'd have to go to Chicago suburbs and try and find kids that could afford to do this. So you drive around Chicago, and that little license plate cover that you see on cars, it says, alumni of, and we had quite a few people that you would drive past and it would say Illinois State, Illinois State. And it always stuck in my head. I'm like, that must be a pretty good spot, and if people are prideful about it enough to put on their license plate cover, then it's usually a place you can recruit to. So once we got here, we figured that part out, and the school itself is really good. There's a really, really good business school. There's a really good ag school, and those are two things that we recruit heavily to. And then, obviously on the baseball side, there's pages on our website that you can go look at and see what we have to offer. We have a lot of professional experience on our coaching staff, and it's a little bit different than what some of the other people have out there. But those are things that we sell. But a lot of it is the school.
Well, I would think that it would be a definite check mark next to a college that has former big leaguers or professional experience on the staff, because A, you're going to know, as far as from an evaluation standpoint, how to bring up the game, the projectable skill sets, but also put a good word in, whether it's from the Cape Cod League or Summer Collegiate League, and obviously with the scouts. Do you find that the Missouri Valley Conference is scouted heavily with regard to the weekend series? I know you have UIC, you have Evansville, so you have some really, really good schools in that conference. Do you see a lot of scouts out watching series during the weekends in season conference?
You do, and you know how it is. I mean, they're chasing that Friday night guy. So if there's a Friday night guy, then they're all somewhere, and then Saturday, Sunday. We've been very fortunate. We've gotten in kind of the 3 drafts that we've had here. I think we've had 9 and an incoming guy get lost. So we've done very, very well on the scouting side, or getting players drafted, some to our own detriment of our team, because we've lost a lot of juniors in this process. But ultimately, yeah, I mean, you can get drafted very high out of the Missouri Valley. Last year, our center fielder Ryan Cermak went in the 2nd round. I know we had a 5th rounder and a 8th rounder, I believe, my first year here. Owen Miller was here the year before I got here. I think he was a 3rd rounder, and he's already been in the big leagues. Paul DeYoung played here. So, that's one piece that we certainly do recruit to is, there's been a lot of big leaguers come through here. And, we've just built a new indoor on our field so we can get, even more development done. And I think all those things add up to, it being a pretty good situation for the kid who wants to come in and get an opportunity to play professional baseball.
Where are you? Obviously, you say Illinois, you say the Midwest, but you mentioned California. I know you're from Northern California. When you're talking to potential recruits, do you have contacts throughout the country? Do you spread out and go see a bunch of tournaments during the summer? Is it your college camps that you have on campus? Where are you doing, or where's your focus with regard to recruiting?
It's interesting because it's moved around a little bit. During COVID, obviously we weren't out, and that's when we had to rebuild, and we were stuck looking at a screen like this trying to figure it out. So at that point we relied on some of our contacts, that we had, that we really trusted, because those people could be out. Our I have some in California, and we've done pretty well there. Um, we have multiple starters that are from California. We do really well on the high school scene in Illinois, Chicago mainly, and then we also do well in Wisconsin. We have some of our better players are from Wisconsin, and until University of Wisconsin decides to put a baseball team on the field, there's a lot of schools are going to go in there and continue to poach their players, because they got enough players they could be in the World Series if they
That's
had a
right.
team. It's crazy, but just you got to rely on people, because you can't see all the kids. There's so many people, so many kids out there. There's a lot of players. We do really well in our camps. We have a lot of kids that show up, and because I like to see myself, they know that I'm obviously at the camp, and we try to get in front of things that way as well. And there's a lot of different ways to see guys and be out there, but it's kind of a mixed bag.
Well, what I want to kind of take a deeper dive into, because you have a unique background, and you've mentioned it a couple times this evening, when I'm talking with student athletes, and they always come up to me and say, I'm an infielder. And I'll always tell them, you might want to consider catching. Now, you were a shortstop. Russell Martin comes to mind, Greg Biggio. The list is plentiful with regard to former Jorge Posada at South Alabama.
Those guys were all way better than me, by the way.
Hey, you were a big leaguer. So, in other words, they're all in your ballpark. Some you could, I guess, classify played longer, but technically you're all big leaguers. My point is, how do you convey to a young student athlete, hey, you might want to throw the gear on every once in a while, even if you're a second baseman or a shortstop, because it can, A, extend your career, or B, give you greater opportunities that you may not have known existed if you throw on the it is National Catching Day, by the way, which is why I'm asking today.
Fantastic.
And so how do you convey that to a potential recruit? Hey, you might want to give catching a try.
I think they really got to want to do it. It sucks, to be honest.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, I was a shortstop. I really enjoyed playing shortstop. And for me, they moved me basically first day and I start catching. And I had a hard time with it because in the lower levels, I still felt like, man, I think I'm as good as that guy, or I could play like that guy. And then for me, when I got to double A, I looked out and go, oh, that's what a shortstop looks like. And I looked at myself and I go, this is probably what a catcher looks like. So, it was hard to do. And I think it's hard to do at the amateur level because in pro ball, I was allowed to get a lot of reps, right? You're playing every single day. And that's what you need. If you're going to make a change, especially later on in your career, you're going to need the reps to catch up. And, sometimes they're just not there to catch up, and sometimes they are. We've never really tried to convert a guy. We've had a couple guys that we did it for utility purposes. Like you can only travel so many guys in conference, and this one guy was had a chance to maybe help us out if we were only going to keep two and some things like that. But the player, I think, needs to want to come to you and say, hey, I want to catch. If I got to go to the player and say, I want you to catch, I think it's going to be pretty tough because that's a hard sell. Because like I said, it's not fun. You're going to get beat up. You're going to be bruised. And it's not the same as playing, those other positions. So, I think you got to find the right guy that wants to do it.
Yeah, I still wear a couple every now and Tyler decided to start to throw a split finger this year.
Oh,
and out of the kindness of my heart, I caught, and I can tell you that I still have a body tattoo on my shin.
So it caught you. You didn't.
Yeah, it caught me. I didn't quite catch it. So, one of the other things that I want to get from your perspective, again, coming from Northern California. Now, as I talk to you, tomorrow's forecast for us here in Boston is -4. You come from Northern Cal, you have some pretty nice weather. You come from California, some pretty nice weather. You go into Illinois and Nebraska. I know you play in Nebraska this year. Those are some cold weather states. And so how do you get those warmer climate guys to kind of acclimate themselves into, the fall and the early part of the season at Illinois State?
We only let them visit in the summertime. They know where we've done pretty well is some of the skill positions, like a shortstop or second base. Those kids have tended to come from the warmer weather states. They go home, and I tell them when they go home for Christmas, I say, hey, you need to take as many ground balls as possible outside because we don't have that available for you here. And we've been outside a couple times so far on our turf field. But they go home and they like one of our portal guys, he's from Hawaii. So he's out there playing on, real fields to me. And with that, I tell him as many ground balls as possible because once you get back, it's more outside on the turf every once in a while. So getting them acclimated, baseball players are tough, man. They want to play. And it's something that they all know what they're getting into. And I think we have such a core of Illinois and Wisconsin kids. I mean, the Wisconsin kids, they think they're at San Diego when they come down to our weather. So and we do well in Canada. We've had multiple Canadians, and those guys are in the same boat as Wisconsin. They're like, man, it's really warm out, and I'm like, I got 3 layers on. So, you the core of the team is from cold weather, and I think if the kind of the bitching and complaining starts, I think those guys nip it before I ever get to it. So, I think it just happens that way.
Well, we have a large Canadian audience joining us this evening. In fact, there's a few that are commenting to my right here, and so they'll be obviously sending you an email now that you mentioned the Canadian brethren up north. So, what I want to ask, so that parents, I have 2 questions that came in. I'm going to group them together.
Go.
When you're going forward, how does a potential recruit know that you're in it to win it for an extended period of time in Illinois State? Everybody's commenting, you're a big leaguer, you're very articulate, you're well-spoken, you have a great, developed a great program. They want to come there. They're in the class of 2024. How do you give those parents a peace of mind, when they say, hey, coach, you're going to be here for us? Or, is that something that comes up in your recruitment talks at all? As far as, I know you have young family there and they probably love the area as much as you. But I have a parent here asking, what if we show up and coach is back in California? Now what? So how do you want to address that?
Well, first of all, I can promise I'm not going back to California. But ultimately, my family's all moved out of California now. They live in Idaho, actually, and BC State does not have a program. So I think we're good. But my wife, she moved out to California when I was playing. I was up and down with the Giants at that point. And our idea was when I was done playing, we were going to move back to the Midwest where she's from in St. Louis. So, I took the job with Sac State with Reggie, and I coached there for 4 years. And we we kind of drew a circle around St. Louis that we felt was like driving distance. And then obviously jobs that, I felt were, good jobs for my career as well. And anytime one of those jobs popped open, we tried to get it. And I did not realize how hard that would be to kind of jump the Rocky Mountains per se and, get some Midwestern coach to listen to a guy from California. But ultimately, I tricked Mark Wazakowski into hiring me at Purdue, and we were there for 2 years, and that was 5 hours away from St. Louis. And then when this job opened up, we are about 3 hours from her parents.
Bingo.
So that was kind of the inside scoop as to why we chose to be in this vicinity and ultimately this school. As a coach, a lot of people don't realize it's really difficult because you're going to bounce around. And we had our first daughter at Purdue, and our second one basically like 30 days before I took this job. I think she was about a month old, and so we don't have family around us. And for me, you don't just leave daughters with just random people. So being somewhat close to family was very, very important. And like I said, my parents are in Boise, and there's no Boise State baseball anymore. And I don't think anybody's falling for that trap if they started open again. But so I think that's a big deal for us, being somewhat close and having that network established, because as coaches, you move around and all of a sudden you got to start all over on, babysitters and things like that. It becomes very difficult. And our daughters, she's in kindergarten, our oldest, and we have a private school that she goes to that we really like, and it has some values that we appreciate. They say the Pledge of Allegiance, and those were things that for us were like, we're a little bit old school, and we like them standing up and saying the Pledge of Allegiances and things like that. So those situations are hard to buy you out of, if that makes sense. Certainly somebody comes and says you're the manager of the New York Yankees, you take the job, right?
Right.
But you get things established, and it just gets harder and harder every year, to make yourself want to go. And now, I think the thing that people aren't maybe forecasting as much as, I think you got to sit back and watch it, see how long it takes these people to rebuild some of these programs now. Because if I were to leave my current situation, statistics show you that about 75% of your players hit the portal. So now
Right.
you got to come in, and I think it's somewhat easier at the lower level to rebuild, and it seemed to be a little bit easier at the really high level because they can just go portal and kind of make it okay for the get go. But ultimately, your best players are going to come through the high school ranks, and like when we took this job, you were really kind of recruiting that 2021 class, and this was back in 2018, where you could really get in on some of those young players that you really wanted without kind of only finding the needle in the haystack guy. So I think if you're a parent, watch and see how this works for the next couple of years because you had some jobs change hands this last year, and there was quite a few portal things that happen where a lot of players are gone, and then I think you might see some coaches going, I don't know if I want to take those jobs because that might be a 5, 6, 7 year overhaul to get that thing back where it needs to be.
Well, I think you just scored a lot of bonus points with parents knowing that you're in it to win it with your children and you're kind of immersing yourself in the community. That seemed to go a long way with a lot of comments that just came flurrying in.
Don't forget the wife. We're
Oh, the
close to
wife. Well,
get
that was
her.
one of the
Yeah.
things you mentioned
Come on,
earlier.
there you go. All right.
All the moms were giving you a standing ovation on that.
We got Valentine's Day coming up too, right before the season.
Right.
Normally,
Well, that's
we
3 days
leave.
before the season, right? You open up on the 17th.
Correct. And when I was playing in pro ball, Valentine's Day for
Spring
some
training.
reason was the day the Giants always reported you to spring
Always.
training pitchers and
Yeah.
catchers. And my wife still doesn't let me forget that one. So this year she looked at the calendar and she's like, "Oh, you're home. There we go." So
Bingo, that's brownie points. Well, I'm going to take advantage of a little extra time, and I want to ask because I have a parent that just asked me, can Coach Holmes, can you tell parents, more importantly, student athletes, the true definition of a Division I recruitable athlete? Meaning, we have about 400,000 high school varsity players that play within the federation across the United States, and only 10 to 12,000 depending upon the roster sizes. Give us an example of what makes a Division I student athlete. What is it that's different, and what is it that separates a potential recruit? Is it velocity, arm strength, foot speed, power? What are the tools that these young student athletes have to have in order to make that jump from high school to Division I baseball?
I think baseball that is in Division I is still somewhat of a combine. Like you have to be able to do certain things in order at your position in order to compete. But that's also the beauty of it is you don't have to. We got some guys that, and I've told him, I said, you got D2, like Division II skill set or height and weight, but you got D1 heart and D1 guts and D1 confidence. And then they're allowed to play Division I baseball. The hardest thing for us to find is the guy who has the confidence to play.
Bingo.
We don't miss when we go recruiting. Like if I go recruit your son and it says 92 on the gun, he shows up and you know what? He throws 92. He doesn't just throw 80. So those components we don't really miss on. And there's so many recruiting services or whatever you want to call them out there now that even if we saw him on a really bad day, you can go look it up and they got video of him showing 91 miles an hour. Like you know what you're probably getting. And if you don't know how fast he is, look that up too, because it'll show a video of him. And if you don't believe them, you can stop watch the video if you want. So all of those things, schools don't miss on that. And they the kids know that, you kind of need to be a certain velocity or whatever. But ultimately the guys that survive are the ones that believe in themselves. And how do you believe in yourselves? Do you put in the work first and then have some success? And that's probably how it works. So for us, for the one factor for me that I think differentiates everybody is how much do you love baseball? Do you go to practice or do you get to go to practice? Because the guys that really love practice, they get to go to practice. They can't wait for their, no offense to the academic side, because we recruit high, intelligent kids, but they can't wait for practice to get or school to get out so they can go to practice. And I think that all freshmen, especially during the COVID era where you have that fifth year guy in there, get smoked at some point. Like you get hit right in the mouth. And if you don't love baseball, I think it's going to be really, really tough for you. But the kids that just love baseball, Do you watch baseball on TV? Do you know, what do those things really mean to you? And are you the kid that's retweeting highlights, that the shortstops are making great plays? Because that means you love baseball. And those are the kids that really have success. And you can't fake love. People have been trying to fake love in all kinds of entities for years, and it doesn't work.
So
People see
true.
right through it. So the kids that really love baseball for us, they cream rises, and those are the ones that ultimately have. Even if they got a Division 2 skill set, they'll play Division 1 baseball.
Well, I think it's important. I know one parent's asking me if you check out the schedule that Illinois State plays, their out of conference schedule. Now they're in conference at Missouri Valley it really has quality, high level. Missouri State, UIC, Evansville. I used to, as a dad, see UIC every year opening weekend. They went to
Oh yeah.
Vanderbilt. So I've seen the talent, and I know John and I know a few of the coaches in the conference. And this out of conference schedule, I know last year you were started out of the gate with Arkansas, but you still play Arkansas, Minnesota, Iowa. I mean, you have some really there's some hills and hurdles there. So this isn't like you're not playing 54 games and you're trying to avoid. You're playing a big boy schedule, and if you're coming to Illinois State, you need to be ready to compete. When you talk about competing to student athletes, what is something that visually can tell you they're competing with every fiber of their being? We use that word a lot, but what is something that you're looking for? Is it that turn at first base? Is it coming on and off the field? How are you looking at that competitive nature of a prospective student athlete?
I think we like to see them fail. Ultimately, you don't want to go and get your only look and see the kid fail. But there's times that we recruited kids just because everyone tells us, hey, the kid is really good. The numbers show he's really good, and we show up on a bad day. But how does he handle the failure? Um, I think the kids that you can tell that if they strike out and they're pissed, that's not a bad deal. I don't want them, firing their helmet into the stands or something, but Carl Everett, and the Red Sox, those type of things. You're not looking for that. But every good player I played with, they had some true, fire inside them that, at a certain point, I saw a lot of those guys, it boils over, right? But I think that's a big deal is the guys that play that failure really bothers them. And not bothers them to where they get down and they lose confidence in their, as our my old boss at Purdue used to say, dragging this blanket like Linus.
Right.
We're not looking for that, but when something doesn't go right and they're bothered, that means they probably got a little bit of perfectionist in them, and that's usually a pretty good competitor. Because that if you're a perfectionist, is you don't like to lose, you don't like to do things the wrong way, and that's why we've done so well with that student on the student side. Like, is he that 3.7, that 4.0 guy? Because there's no way that everyone cares about every subject that you're studying, but you do care about that grade that you get at the end.
Oh yes.
So, that's what we're looking for is that guy that failure bothers, and, can you see it? Because some guys, they walk off the field or they lose or, they go over 4 and it's not that big of a deal to them. And as a player to me, like that was a big deal. So I think that's one thing that, kind of separates.
Well, I want to let all the parents know that have been asking me questions about contact. Coach Holmes Steve does have Twitter. I don't know how active you are on Twitter, but he does have Twitter. Obviously, an email. I'm going to have all of that in the description in the video so that you'll be able to reach out, find out about camps, talk about where the staff might be during the course of the summer, et cetera. But I will have all the contact information. So you've been a big hit with the moms because you've mentioned your wife a few times.
There we go.
So brownie points for Coach. But Steve, I want to say thank you. Tyler said to say hello. He is over in Japan, and they are, I think, 15 hours ahead of us. So it's actually tomorrow there today.
Is he enjoying it?
He's loving it. Yeah, he actually their traditions over there are absolutely amazing. They have a spring training that's really unique. It takes them to 3 different venues.
Yep.
And so it's 2 weeks here, 2 weeks there, and then ultimately the final 2 weeks at the Dome. But he hopes to be back in the greater U.S. next year. He has a little baby boy that's home in Texas, so that's kind of aching on him a little bit. But he said to say hello and make sure that I wore my Giants hat. So I told him I would do that for you. But Steve, thank you very much for taking the time to join us. Best of luck. I know the season kicks off on the 17th. And I'll be talking with you about a few guys that I've seen over the last few weeks. I'll send over some video to you as well.
Perfect. It takes a whole village to build a program.
Amen. I know that, brother. So I want to let everybody know all of your information. If you have questions about our comments, our discussion here tonight with Coach Holm at Illinois State, please feel free to put them in the comments section. The Baseball Blue Book, this is what brings us all together. It's all about access for families and student athletes. Our hope is to provide you with content directly from the coaches so that you can hear exactly what it's going to take and how to get there directly from the coaches. Now, next Thursday, 9 p.m. Eastern, we're going to have Tim Corbin from Vanderbilt University. We know a little bit about Vanderbilt and the Beede family, so that's at 9 p.m. I want to make sure you're spreading the word. Subscribe to the channel. Let us know that you like tonight's video and content, but with a thumbs up. Be sure and join us next Thursday. Steve, thank you very much. Happy Valentine's Day to the wife, and thank you to the girls for giving us your time tonight.
All right. Thank you, guys.
You're
I
welcome.
appreciate having me.
Bye now, guys.
See you guys.